beautiful people. Welcome back to the Mastery Series Part 3. This will be an in-depth look at how to direct and intuitively understand energy. Now, the universe as you know it is in that sense separated through frequencies. That means dimensions of experience. If you can perceive a frequency depends on if you actually have the sensor to decode that specific frequency. So as such, we are aware of that humans have obviously 5 senses that point into what we perceive as the physical universe, and therefore we can decode, for example, visual information, hearing information, we can decode smells and so on into an experience. But importantly, we think, for example, seeing is something different than hearing or tasting, but it is actually not the case. It's just a different sensor that interprets a different frequency. But ultimately, all these sensors do interpret electromagnetic fields. Now, with that out of the way, we can come to an understanding that anything that we ever perceive is energy that is arranged in a certain structure, and structure is information. So in order to perceive an object, there needs to be a plan within the object, an intelligence within the energy that says we arrange like this and we keep this structure as such intact. Otherwise it will fall apart. So there's an organizing intelligence. Now, if I understand that everything in the universe is energy that takes form, but all forms are temporary, then I come to an understanding that everything is flowing. You might be under the hallucination or under the impression there is something that you call yourself that is a person that is consistent. But that is not true. Even the cells, the neurons, they constantly go through change. That means there is no such thing as a person, because you see, you can wake up in the morning and you act completely differently than you acted the day before, because there's constant change. So in the change you can trust, because the change is permanently happening within impermanence. So as such, at some point when we let go of egoic concepts, when we let go of the idea that we are a form or a specific electromagnetic phenomena or whatever, when we let go of that more and more, at some point we become friends with transformation. And transformation is something that is very misunderstood and often labeled death from the perspective of ego. There is no death, there's just transformation. Means different energetic states are different states of consciousness. So at some point you will shift into states of higher intelligence. But for those shifts to happen, you need to have a frequency change, because otherwise you're not a match to those experiences. In order to have an experience, you need to share a frequency band. So then, in order for you to become a match to a different type of experience, you need to at some point learn to direct energy to bring about changes in the physical body, but also in the auric field. Now, we spoke about shadow work and how shadow work is necessary to increase in our energy, because out of trauma many of us have taken on a low energy state and confused it for ourselves. That means we have kept the low energy state intact, and the energy limiter is the ego. That means the self-concept, the identity that you've constructed for yourself. Because the ego says we don't go beyond that energy limit. Otherwise, we face repercussions in society. We get exiled from our families, we lose our job or whatever. So we choose not to be authentic, therefore use the ego as an energy blocker, limit our energy, and now we cannot escape what we perceive as our experience. That we then feel is a very strong limitation. Now, in order to remove the energy blocker, I need to have a reversal of thinking. we were trained to believe that limitations keep us safe, but they don't keep us safe. They just keep us limited, you see. And the more limited you are, the more afraid you are. Because let's say, there's a tremendous difference in perspective. If you think about, you would look down a country from a mountain, or from a little tower, or from a tree, or you would crawl over the floor, right? Your perspective would be tremendously limited. Therefore, your meta-intelligence would be limited, and your awareness of what's actually going on is tiny. And this causes a lot of anxiety for people to be trapped in such a limited state of perceiving, of picking up on energy and information. So, we want to change that, don't we? In order to change this, at first we need to learn how to direct energy with our breath. This is how it starts for most of you, because most of you will not be able to see energy yet or feel it directly. Yeah? So often we learn first in that sense that we breathe in, and when we breathe out, we focus on a certain part of the body. Now this is important because if you have a blockage somewhere, the moment you breathe in, then you breathe into that part of the body where the blockage is. Just by directing your focus while you're slowly breathing out, you start shifting energy from the in-breath into the blockage, therefore softening the blockage up. This is one way of restoring energy flow. So in that sense, think about breathing in as an energy collection and breathing out as an energy direction. Yeah? So, collecting energy, directing energy. So, when you feel, for example, anxiety in your hands or in your lower arms, yeah, there's a lot of stress that people often feel in this area. And the reason is it has to do with doing or not doing. Because our arms and our hands, they are physical representation of action, of shaping, of creating. Yeah? If you think about a craftsman, when he starts creating a statue or pottery or whatever, he gives basically a form shape with his hands, right? So when we feel an anxiety, where we're unsure about action, should I do something or should I not do something, this is when we feel stress building up in the lower arms and in the hands. Now I can make an exercise by, for example, breathing in, and then I focus on the lower arm while I slowly breathe out. If you practice this for a while, at some point you can feel first maybe a little energy field. It's a little bit like this. Do you remember those old TV screens before we had flat screens? When you put your hands on them and you would slowly go with the screen, you could feel the electromagnetic field from the screen. You could feel the radiation, right? So this would give you a little shiver, right? So when you breathe out at some point, you can feel a very gentle little shiver like going over your skin. Now, this is one of the first sensations about feeling energy. At some point, if you practice this for a while, you can even feel heat. So suddenly you feel your hands warming up, or you feel your arms warming up. And with that technique, you can charge different places in the body, and you can even use it to direct energy to chakras in hope of opening that up. So, for example, you can breathe into the third eye, but just giving it attention, breathe in, and then with full awareness, shift all attention into the spot while focusing slowly on the out breath. Yeah, this is a way of activating it as well. When the third eye is open, we then have a different capacity of directing energy because now we can do it visually. That means we're not necessarily seeing energy already, but you can use your fantasy, you can use visualization. For example, you can imagine a light beam, yeah, coming from the top, vertically entering your head, running down the spine, hitting the bottom of the spine, and then going back up, yeah, until it touches the top of the head. And in that process, you imagine how the energy, for example, and you give it a color, you, for example, a white color, how the energy moves up the spine, and now you imagine how the energy leaves the spine through the nervous system, enters the muscles and so on. So in that sense, you charge your whole body up. Very important, the visualization is not the actual energy. Yeah? It's important to stay sane. And some people, when they start practicing visualization, when they practice any form of active meditation, when they haven't experienced an egoless state yet, they start creating a lot of stories. And those stories are delusional. Okay? What you tell yourself about what happens is not what happens. This is extra. This is confusion. Okay? This is added on top of it. You don't need that. So don't create stories about those visualizations in your head. Yeah? If you can. If not, go back to basics. It's very important. Go back to breathing meditation. Go back to Zen practice. If you cannot resist creating stories about what you're doing in your mind. But let's say at some point, by visualizing light, you tell energy where to go, because energy is intelligent. And it listens to your intention. That's the interesting part. So if you have an intention of, I want to have light come in and, for example, fill in my chest center, yeah, my heart area, you simply visualize light coming in the top of the head, and then you spread it through the chest. And at first nothing might happen. You might feel nothing. Yeah, you might even think that, like, is it working? Yeah, what am I trying? Is it some fancy esoteric technique that has it has no backing in science or whatever? Practice it for a while, and at some point when you feel energetic changes in the physical body, that means you pick it up with your physical senses as well. That means you feel it in your nervous system. You feel it in the senses in your skin. You feel heat, for example. Or you feel movement. Or you can feel that something unblocks, and you might have little twitches or spasms, which is often a sign of blockages dissolving, right? So there are some people, when they meditate, they have a twitch in the shoulder, in the arm. Suddenly they have this twitch, right? It's fairly common, because when energy hits a blockage, when electricity runs through the nervous system and hits a block, you have a short twitch. That is very healthy, actually, because it means your nervous system is operating correctly. Yeah? So there's nothing to worry about when you have twitches or little spasms while doing such exercises. So in order to heal our energetic body and our physical body, because we want to increase in frequency, of course we do the shadow work. That means the trauma integration exercises. By focusing on the blockages, shifting our awareness deeply into them with the Zen practice that we have done before. That means no biophysical fight or flight response. Straight posture, relaxed shoulders, relaxed jaw, deep breathing, relaxed hands. So no fight or flight response can happen. So we shift into the tight spots in the body, into the painful spots, into the uncomfortable spots. And with further practice, we gain access to the memory. We can relive it, and now we have a choice of viewing the memory in a different way. So we're changing the energy frequency. But at some point, when traumas are integrated, the main traumas, then we want to start healing the energy field directly. So then we can use different colors of energy. Most of us have dark energy in the system. Yeah? That means blockages, parasites, yeah, who cannot be seen by the visible eye. Yeah? So in order to transform those spots, we, in that sense, need a purifying light. This is violet light. So you can, for example, meditate imagining that you're sitting in a violet fire and that it permeates the whole body, the whole energy field. This is the color of transformation. This is the frequency of transformation. So should you have blockages, it starts purifying them, it starts burning them away. With further practice, you can direct it to very specific parts of the body. So you imagine, for example, a ray of violet light piercing a very specific spot where you feel that there's something that is very hardened, is very hard to remove. So you visualize it being permeated by violet light, and at some point it will burn away the blockages. Because think about fire, what does it do? When you put an object into fire, it starts dissolving the object into its components. So you expose it to energy, and the chemical structure, the chemical and physical structure, breaks away. The same thing happens with blockages. If I direct violet light at the blockage, that it starts breaking apart. It's being transformed. It's being burned away. Now, after I've done this, and it takes a lot of concentration, and you also do it with the out breath, yeah? After I've done this, I will direct orange golden light into that spot for a while. And after that, I will direct white light into that spot. So it's a multi-layered approach. First, you burn away the blockage with violet light, and you start healing it with orange or golden light, and then you fill it up with white light. So when you do this, you slowly start repairing your energy field and your physical body from damages that came from psychological trauma, physical trauma, illnesses, and so forth. When you do this, you will slowly start increasing in vibration, and some of you might actually feel, when you lie in bed, for example, that your body is pulsing, that you can feel an energy wave from the feet going to the head and back down in certain intervals. This is perfectly normal. It simply means your energy frequency is rising. Further, when your energy frequency is rising, you will feel certain symptoms because your nervous system is changing, because a lot of, let's say, toxins or poisons are leaving the body. But it also happens with, for example, thought that is poisoning your consciousness, for example, negativity, judgment, whatever. And when you start increasing in energy, let's say you do a violet flame meditation, and you imagine sitting in that violet flame, and suddenly after that meditation you feel very negative and you think it's not working, right? You suddenly have a lot of negative thought, but it's actually because it's working. Before those energies leave your system, they flare up. It's like a tiny ego death. So for example, if you cleanse your aura with such meditation, suddenly very old thoughts, they're probably 10 years old, yeah, sometimes even older, they pop up and be like, why am I thinking that now? That's completely irrelevant. It flares up because it gets hit by the energy, it gets hit by the vibration, and before it dissipates, it enters your state of awareness for a brief moment. So please don't resist it, don't fight it, don't argue with it, because if you would re-energize this. You don't want to re-energize this, you want it to leave. So you need to practice acceptance when that happens. Yeah. So at some point you will move from the visualization, and again, what is visualization? Is telling the intelligent energy where to go. Okay. So at some point you will be able to see the energy. When your third eye is open, when your crown chakra is open, and they start interlinking, you start developing what we can call astral vision. So what's astral vision? Again, dimensions are separated in frequency, right? So here something could be 100 hertz, here's something that is 200 hertz. 100 hertz and 200 hertz cannot interact because they're in a different frequency, right? So they would, for example, go through each other, but there is no impact, there is no happening, right? So in order, for example, to interact with a physical object, you need to have an avatar that is on a similar frequency to have impact. Otherwise there is no impact. You would simply go through the object. So in that sense, at some point you come actually to the perception of the first astral layers. That means the dimensions that are in frequency closest to the physical. You cannot physically interact with them, but you can energetically interact with them and telepathically. You can interact with that realm with thought and light energy. So at some point then you will be able, when you close your eyes and you sit in meditation and you charge the third eye, you will actually see yourself as if you see yourself from third person, like from the outside. You can actually do a scan of your own energy field and see, for example, oh, it's nearly golden everywhere, but I have something black in the shoulder, or something black on the throat, or something black in the neck, and this shows there's dark energy. That means an energy restriction. So when I know this, I can target this specifically. So I can, for example, imagine, I step out of my own body, I imagine this, now I create an energy form, and most of us will take a human form because this is most familiar to us. We take a human form, and I can imagine another me standing in front of my physical body and the aura and the energy field, and directing, for example, from the hand, violet light as a beam into the aura, into the position that is stuck. Now I start purifying that particular part. Now at first you will have a lot of doubt about this, because we have been indoctrinated from a very age on to think that life is only physical. It is not. And as always, when I tell you these things, I will also tell you, don't believe me a single thing. It's very important. Don't believe a single thing anyone says. I don't care if it's Great Master so-and-so, Guru XYZ. Don't believe it, and that doesn't mean to be hostile to a teacher. Quite the opposite. It means to have an open mind. You listen to what the teacher says, and now you practice and you verify it for yourself. Is it working? Is it not working? Now, mind you, it needs patience, because your ego will try to sabotage you. So it will say after trying 1 or 2 times it's not working, right? So you need to have an open mind, and you need to be able to dedicate yourself to a practice for a while, let's say for a month, to feel a change, to feel some sort of energetic symptom, right? So then at some point when you feel something that is tangible, even from your old belief system of matter, let's say when you feel a change in the body, you have a direct sensory input, then you realize, oh, something is really moving, I'm not making it up. That is tremendous when that happens, because then you have a little bit of a breakthrough experience and you get very curious and more open. And the more open you get, the more information you can receive, because you're willing to let it in. Most people would get help by higher intelligence if they would allow it, but their skepticism doesn't allow it, right? Because their skepticism is not one of open inquiry, right? It's not one of abandoning belief. The skepticism is one of hostility, of fear, right? So if it has that connotation, you will resist information that could actually be of service to you, all right? So then, when you practice this for a while, so first directing energy with your out breath by just focusing on a certain body part, and at some point visualizing energy. That means, for example, you imagine your body and you imagine how white light runs through your body, through your nervous system, and you see how that changes your vibration. At some point you can feel that, even how your body starts vibrating. And at some point you can see the energy directly, and you drop the visualizing. Very important, visualizing can make people who are stuck in the ego go bonkers. I mean it. That means understand the visualization is not the phenomenon. Until you don't see the phenomenon directly, until you don't feel the phenomenon directly, visualization is just fantasy, it's just imagination. Alright? At some point when you have a direct sensory input, that you have a verification, oh, my visualization leads to a movement of energy, then you can take this as a verification. Before, don't create narcissistic imagery in your head of who you think you are, because you're only going to get confused. You're going to misdirect yourself. Keep it simple. Move energy in terms of light through the body as an idea first, and once you feel something, you intuitively get a sense of how to do it. Another thing, through meditation, at some point, some of us will start hearing a tone. This is not a tinnitus. This is not something wrong with your eardrums. At some point you will hear a tone, and when you check directly, the tone is actually not in the ears, it's in the middle of the head. This is a tuning tone, okay? So it sounds a little bit like you have an old teapot and it's cooking and it makes this whistling noise, but not as high pitched. So when you sit in meditation and you start hearing the tone, give the tone all your attention, because it is a tuning signal. It comes from a higher dimensional part of yourself, and when you listen to the tone, your body and your energy field start synchronizing with the tone. That means aligning with your higher self. You can practice something similar to increase your frequency by, for example, you take a candle and you look at the candle from roughly 1.50 meter distance. Yeah, and you try to place it on the level of your eyes. And now you watch the candle tip. Yeah, not the candle flame in the middle, but the tip of the candle flame, the very, very tip, where the convergence of the energy happens. And when you watch the candle tip for a long while, you start tuning into the frequency of the candle flame, which is also a higher frequency. So you start tuning into a higher frequency. So when you can't hear the tone yet within your brain, which is a sign of the crown chakra and the third eye aligning, because again you have an entry on top of the head, which is usually called the crown chakra, and you have the third eye here, but they are converging in the middle of the head where the pineal gland is, and this is where the actual crown chakra sits. This is just an opening on top. So when they're converging, basically the energy comes down and the third eye energy comes from the side. Yeah, they're hitting the spot there, then suddenly it starts creating a tone, and we start forming out crystals who are vibrating within the pineal gland, and this is what we hear as a tone. So then you can learn to, in that sense, teach your brain to tune into different frequencies. So when you meditate with open eyes, you look at an object, you start tuning into that frequency, or you look at an animal, you just start tuning into that animal. So you at some point pick up intuitively information from what you're tuning into. So when you watch a candle flame, it raises your energy frequency. And at some point, when the third eye is open and you had the Kundalini experience, you will start hearing the tone. And then the meditations that we do are pretty monotone. I mean, literally, because you're listening to a tone for maybe 3 months. You're just sitting there and you hear like... But you can feel how you start vibrating more and more when you listen to the tone. That means you start aligning with your higher self. But let's say I don't need to address your skepticism, because if you're in this, if you're watching those videos, you have already reached the point where you're open to these type of inputs. So therefore, allow yourself to experiment with energies and understand that you are the master of energy. You're not the victim of energy, how the egos believe. It's just a matter of learning how to direct energy. And then you understand, oh, it follows my intentions. And energy creates. So if it follows my intention and energy creates, think of it like this. Let's say your thoughts impact substance on the astral level. That means you create thought forms all the time. So if you have a certain belief, and egos are very good at that, you see there might be an ego belief, oh I'm ugly, oh I'm ugly, oh I'm ugly, right? Suddenly I change my body language as if I'm ugly. Right? And I don't take care of myself, so I start looking ugly. And suddenly people say, hey, you look pretty ugly right now. So I make it a self-fulfilling prophecy. And then we tell ourselves, oh, I'm powerless. I'm powerless to being ugly, right? But it's actually something that we have created. Same way we can say, oh, I'm not in control, or I'm not in control, or I'm not in control. So I'm sending into the astral matter the thought form of, oh, I'm not in control. Now I start feeding a thought form that constantly tells me you're not in control, you're not in control, you're not in control. And now I have a circle where it confirms my ego and I confirm it. So I'm possessed by my own thought form. Many people are unaware of this. So then, when I understand that I can be so perfectly in control that I create the perfect illusion of not being in control, you see. Because every ego is a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every ego that pretends to be powerless creates constantly situations in which you feel powerless. It is indeed so powerful that it creates the experience of powerlessness. Wrap your head around that. So when you understand that, intention creates direction of movement for energy. So, if my intention is to heal myself, and I verify this for myself over and over, now I'm feeding thought forms to direct me more into the experience of healing, for example. And then it becomes also a self-fulfilling prophecy, but suddenly I don't feel powerless. Strange how that works, doesn't it? Alright, my friends. Contemplate about that. Experiment. Trust your intuition, but don't overthink things. Don't do this to yourself, my friend. Take care.